Welcome back, friends. It's time for Chapter 7 of the Skylark song. And run they did. After a month of training sessions to find their rhythm, Robin and Al engaged with the enemy above No Man's Land for the first time. They came away with 3 bullet holes torn into the wing of the glider and 3 corresponding airships smoking in the dirt below. Robin refused to experience that sort of death. The nameless, bitter defeat, body turned into raw meat amid the stench of burning canvas and the whine of sputtering Klonn engines. She had no desire to be down there, mired in the winding trenches and the endless mud, in the disease and despair of the front. So she fought harder, trained longer, took more missions, and slept less than her fellow pilots. She worked harder and longer. She took more risks. She flew out of the sun and into the crosshairs of the enemy. She attacked aggressively, decisively, and left the fancy flying and noble rules for the air shows. Her guns sang. The airships took their turns waltzing with her glider, but in the end, it was always Robin and Al who returned home. Only Robin and Al. It was exhilarating. Soon enough, Robin had to damn near chase the Klonn across the sky to get her shots in. As Al had predicted, the Klonn fled because they knew it was going to be them or her, and by the gods, Robin Arianhod would make damn well certain it sure as hells wasn't her. The minute the airships were close enough to make out the crude but glowering bird Al had painted on her glider's nose, they banked and fled in the other direction. Nobody was willing to dance with her. As Robin's down count rose, so did her reputation. And as her reputation rose, there was less muttering to be heard in the officers' mess. There were more slaps on the back when she walked through the slums to trade chocolate for charms. The Sealy children gave her wildflowers, the Bene pilots gave her grudging respect, and the officers gave her medals. Robin clinked as she walked, and soon had to trade the medals in for rows of ribbon-covered buttons that now stood in place for the honors on her capelet. Robin was quickly becoming the worst-kept secret in the war. Not that she'd ever really been a secret to begin with. Desperate to ensure that this fame was earned, Robin worked daily at her craft, spent hours practicing targets in the gunnery range, and hand to elbow with Al in the guts of her own glider. Nobody knew that glider better than she did, and nobody could make it soar like she could. The misty banks of the clouds called to her, and, as the wise woman once predicted, Robin was helpless to ignore them. Flying was her greatest happiness, even amid the shells and the shrapnel. And then the Coyote came. It didn't matter what time of day or night Robin was deployed, what hour she was shot from the Zeppelin that carried the gliders high into the sky. It didn't matter whether she was alone on a strafing run, taking down the Klonn-manned anti-glider cannons that speckled the front line, or if she was in formation. It didn't matter if she was twirling her way through a dance with another ship. Wherever she was, whenever she was, she would turn her head to the side, and the Coyote would be there, regular as running clockwork. At first, he shot at her. Robin shot back. Neither scored a more tangible hit than a bullet hole. Then, the Coyote simply began to shadow her, bobbing behind her tail like she had to him the first time they danced, teasing. He would appear like a hobgob out of the ether. Jolting panic would make her fingers clench on the control stick, her breath come too fast, her focus shattered. She would turn to face him, and he would turn away. Eventually, the blinding panic and itch to fight subsided when she spot him. It evolved instead into frustration. He wouldn't fight her, no matter what she tried. Day in and day out, the Coyote's aeroship would block the light as he flew directly above her, taunting, or his cabin would practically brush her glider's belly if he came up from below. Out of the clouds and out of the sun, no matter where Robin was, as long as she had passed the lines of the front, the Coyote would just be there. She screamed at him. She made rude gestures through the windscreen, but still he would not fight. He would play tag until she was exhausted and could no longer keep her glider in the air, until she clenched her teeth and her arms trembled, until Al had to pat her on the shoulder and tell her she'd been up too long. And still he wouldn't fire on her. It didn't escape her notice that he'd somehow improved his fuel reserves as well, the rutting, annoying ass. He was a calculating bastard, that much was clear, and more, Robin had to remind herself that there was no such thing as hobgobs, not really. They were just stories for children. The Coyote was no boogeyman, no reanimated corpse brought back from death by gears and copper wire and a soul stolen with perverted magic. Those were just Air Patrol base stories. He was a man, a soldier, and a damn good pilot. And all of those things could be killed. Eventually, it became clear that the moment the Coyote arrived, there was nothing she could do but turn back. She couldn't maneuver enough to fight with him so goddamn close, and she couldn't finish missions with him clinging to her wake. If she shot at him, he would simply depart, leaving the foul breath of his tailpipes in her throat. When the Coyote arrived, all Robin could do was give up. She even tried doubling back once, hoping she could fool him into thinking she had given up, but the infuriating gold bag had been waiting for her when she'd come back out of the cloud bank. She hated every second of it. Renge and her horrible posse were delighted. There was fresh torment waiting for her every time she walked into the officers' mess lounge for breakfast. She could have just skipped it and gone straight to the hangar, but Robin was trying to prove a point. She belonged where she was, and running away to the canteen would not help her. Every morning there was a wasteful display of Renge's contempt, a pointed and clear display of the relative economic stability of her own people, or a shrine to the All-Mother was erected right on top of the mantle, followed by various attempts to leverage Robin's ignorance of Bene custom into humiliation by singing religious songs over breakfast, to which Robin clearly did not know the words. As news about the Coyote spread, the rumors that Robin had been cursed also began. There were rumors that she was blessed, rumors that she was demon spawn, rumors that she was a hobgob herself, and then, most absurdly of all, that she was somehow in league with the Coyote. Distrust ran rampant, and some of the officers even left the room when she walked in. A small beribboned box of chocolates and an extravagant bouquet of hothouse flowers were left on Robin's regular table one day. The note proclaimed them to be from the Coyote. As Robin knew that the Coyote would never sign his notes with that name, it was obvious it was just more needling. Renge had made a joke out of the most horrific enemy they had. It was disrespectful to the dead, he had claimed. It was disgusting. And when Robin confronted her, publicly, nearly everyone, Bene and Celia alike, had agreed on that point, at least, even as Renge denied that they had come from her. And because Robin couldn't catch the meddling, scrubbed-up cow at her shenanigans, there was no way to bring it up to her superiors. For as much as they supported Robin as a pilot, they treated her differently as well. They couched their orders as demands instead of requests, the way they did with the Bene officers, and more than once, Robin was subjected to the Sealies live to do as they're told lecture. She'd nodded along, mouth clamped shut, and said, "Yes, sir," and "Thank you, sir," when the silence prompted it. As degrading, humiliating, and incensing as this treatment was, it was still worth it just to be able to fly. It was after yet another of these instances, on a horrible, sunny afternoon when the Coyote had chased her out of the sky yet again, that Robin decided to console herself with tea at a table in the lonely back corner of the common mess. Al, sitting opposite to her, poured sweet honey liqueur from his battered flask and into her cup when Robin wasn't looking. She gave him the stink eye over the rim when she tasted it, realizing what he'd done, but she didn't stop drinking it. They sat together in deep, frustrated silence, and Robin had to consciously relax her jaw. It was clenched so tight it started to make her neck ache. She was, to put it mildly, furious. It wafted off her like a dark cloud, and the rest of the Sealies were giving her a very wide berth. The audacity of the Coyote's open taunt and the arrogant, smug smirks on what little of his face she could see when she caught him looking through his own windscreen at her had her seething. "I hate him," she barked. "He's doing this on purpose." "Robin," Al admonished, "next time I'll shoot him down. I really will." She brushed her shoulder with crossed fingers to ensure she wasn't fouling up her chances by doing so. Al put his flask back in his pocket. Robin, he's doing it to annoy you, and he's succeeding. You know that. He's an obsessive prig, is what he is. And he's trying to get you upset enough that you'll make a mistake, and he's winning at that, yeah? So calm down. Then, around them, the hangar went suddenly silent. Robin looked up. A general stood in the doorway, hesitating on the threshold as though uncertain whether or not stepping into the common canteen would ruin his shoes. The man himself was olive-complected, resplendent in his moss-green uniform, crisp and clean, with sideburns that seemed to be trying to stage an invasion of his chin. Robin snapped to attention, standing along with all the other soldiers in the room. The general scanned the faces of the gathered ranks until, as she feared that they would, his eyes zeroed in on her. He beckoned with a jerk of his chin. Grimacing, Robin made her way through the blatantly staring crowd. Al followed in her wake, stubbornly proclaiming his allegiance. The general frowned at Al as they both stopped before him and snapped off smart salutes. "Captain Arianhod," he said by way of greeting, pointedly ignoring her sergeant. "Sir," she replied with a deferential nod, keeping her face carefully blank. The Coyote still troubles you, I hear." Robin flushed, her fury doubling. "How dare you reprimand me like this in front of all of these people," she thought. "In front of my people, especially after ignoring Al." Robin felt her cheeks get hot, and she was shamed by the reaction. She cleared her throat and, in a forcefully calm voice, said, "Next time, sir, I swear." He was looking at her too intently to allow her to brush away the bad luck, but she resolved to do it in the moment he was gone. Al reached up and made the gesture on her behalf. "Next time might come sooner than you think, Captain." He raised his hand, and Robin's gaze dropped to the thick, snowy white envelope in his grip. "You have a love letter." The people around them let out a collective gasp. Robin felt the blood drain from her face, and for a very brief moment, she thought she might actually swoon. One of Al's square, strong hands pressed against the small of her back, ready to catch her if he had to, but she swallowed hard, blinked the black sparks away from her eyes, and took a deep breath. Surely her reputation hadn't become that well known among the Klonn. Surely the Coyote didn't know where she was stationed. Except there the letter was. She stepped forward and plucked the envelope from the general's pinched fingers. With trembling hands, she split the royal blue seal open. The only sounds in the room were the hollow shuffle of feet, the deafening thud of her heart in her own ears, and the heavy silence of anticipation. The paper was thick, bright white, and clearly expensive. The ink was dark and fat, almost raised off the paper, and the script was in an elegant, well-trained hand. It said, "To the Robin, I tire of our slow courtship. Let us dance. Let it be tomorrow at noon, and let it be in the place we first met. Yes, your wings have changed, but I know who you are, and I remember what you did. The wolf." A stylized paw print graced the second dollop of blue wax in the bottom corner, and Robin felt for a moment as if she might be sick. On the small of her back, Al's hand curled into a fist. "When?" the general asked. His voice held no surprise. The seal would have made it clear who it was from, and what its purpose would be. Robin swallowed hard and forced her own voice not to tremble. "Tomorrow, noon. The place where I marked the map with blood." There was a long silence as the general screwed his eyes shut for a moment. The lines around his eyes and under his chin suddenly seemed deeper, and the obvious show of weakness scared Robin more than the contents of the letter had. "Sir?" The general took a deep breath. "We can ill afford to lose you, Captain Arianhod, but the risk is far outweighed by the chance to be rid of the Coyote once and for all." He nodded once, more to himself than to Robin, and then met her eyes squarely. "Very well. You may answer the Coyote's challenge with your guns, Captain. Take him down." Around her, the mess erupted into wild, enthusiastic cheers. Al's hand slid up her spine to her shoulder and patted her once. "Yes, sir," Robin said. The general nodded again, once, firmly. "May the All-Mother protect you tomorrow." "Thank you, sir," she said, accepting the spirit of the blessing for what it was, if not the actual blessing itself. Besides, the Bene's All-Mother was a goddess, wasn't she? Robin could let herself believe in the All-Mother along with the rest of them. "And Captain," the general said before he turned and walked away, "make sure you make the bastard pay." Robin's rage towards the Coyote shifted in that moment. It became something bigger. No longer small and dark, fisted behind her heart, it blossomed, pushing up against the underside of her skin, became something warm and triumphant. Robin felt the feral, predatory grin slide across her face. She welcomed it. "Yes, sir," she said. Fear tried to swell in her breast, fear of death, fear of losing, but it was drowned immediately by the desire for revenge. Tomorrow, she would take back the sky she so loved. Tomorrow, it would be her or the Coyote. And it had never before been her. Robin was afraid that she wouldn't be able to sleep that night, but somehow she managed to close her eyes at sunset and wake a few hours after sunrise, feeling rested. If she'd had any dreams, she didn't remember them. A quiet sense of calm had settled over her like a downy blanket, and it seemed to extend to the entire house. She dressed quietly and was about to head out when the gentle tick of a pebble hitting the plyboard over her window caught her attention. Al. She crept out of her room before her parents awoke, pausing briefly to look in on them. Papa was curled around Mama, his bushy mustache pressed against her forehead like an affectionate kitten. Robin raised her palms and prayed silently that their sleep would stay peaceful. Then she swung her capelet around her shoulders, the love letter tucked into the inner pocket, donned her pilot's goggles, and let herself out. Al was waiting for her on the step, hands jammed into his pockets and shoulders hunched to ward off the early morning chill. They nodded to one another before moving on in silence. The walk to the base was cold. She wished she'd thought to grab a scarf. Winter was now well on its way. Frost clung to the stones and the shadows and iced the ragged teeth of shattered windows. It had rained in the night, transforming the soot and smoke that usually hung in the air into greasy, black messes on the uneven paving stones. She had to tread carefully to avoid the places where the slicks had frozen into dark ice. The buckle on the strap of her goggles was cold against her scalp, and Robin felt more animate because of it. Every pore tingled with expectancy. Every hair was on end. Every scent and sound seemed sharper this morning. Her sight seemed clearer. Her whole body was alive with anticipation. When they arrived on base, they went straight to their glider. Desperate for some kind of action, for some way to be proactive, for something to do with her hands and her unspent energy, Robin stripped off her capelet, draped it haphazardly from the glider's wing, and then rolled up her sleeves. Al peeled back the canvas on the front, careful not to crack the painted Robin. He handed her a spanner without comment and, shoulder to shoulder, practically cheek to cheek, they tuned the glider's heart. "Robin, can you move your arm to... Yes, that. Give me the... yeah," Robin said when she tossed the hammer to him. He pounded for a moment on a bent gear tooth, then dropped the hammer back into the toolbox with a clatter loud enough to make Robin wince. "What am I doing?" Robin asked, standing back from the nose and wiping at the grease she'd smeared on her forehead. Al blinked at her, then smiled. "Tuning the system alongside your mid-flight, Captain. Hasn't the General already scolded you enough about doing work below your rank?" Robin sighed and dropped down onto the dew-wet grass beside the gravel runway. She stretched out her cramped legs and rotated her stiff shoulders and sighed again. "I mean, why am I letting this jerk get to me?" Al came around to sit beside her on the ground, wiping the grease off his hands with a rag. He leaned into Robin, shoulders touching and knees bumping, eyes on the sparse, thready clouds that drifted above them, and the place where the sky was seeping into a rich, robust red. He's obsessed, like you said. You've outmaneuvered him. You can stay ahead of his guns. No one else has done that. Yeah, but he's not shooting at me. And now that goddamn love letter. Al just grunted. Robin shifted so she could face him and tried to ignore the meaty hand that Al let drift to the inside of her closest knee. She wasn't in the mood for roughhousing, but she appreciated the friendliness of the gesture all the same. It's more like he's trying to learn how I fly. Do you think that's it? Is he shadowing me to learn how I fly so he can eventually shoot me down? Al frowned. I don't know. He could have shot us down yesterday and he didn't. He what? Robin asked, aghast. Al, why didn't you say something? How close was he? Real close, Al said, picking morosely at a blade of grass. And you didn't warn me? I thought we were dead, Al snapped suddenly, ripping at the blades. He was already beside us before I saw him, and I thought we were dead, and I was scared. I was a coward. I didn't say a thing. I couldn't. Oh, Al, Robin said softly, and laid one of her scarred palms on his knee, comforting. It's fine. It's not, though, Al snapped. I'm supposed to have your back, and I didn't. I failed you. If he was that close, it's only because he's been sneaky. I know someone's done something to his running airship, you know? It runs too quiet. I've been thinking about it since that first time Wade and I faced him. Someone's been tinkering with his engine. Robin, Al interrupted. He cupped his hand over hers on his knee. He saw you. I mean, he really saw you. I looked up and he was beside us, practically under our wing, and he was looking right at you. I could see his mask and his eyes and everything. He was studying you. Robin shuddered, her skin tightening in fear. That's horrible. Al licked his lips and leaned closer, comforting her back. I wouldn't let him get you. Not if I could help it. Yeah, but what if you can't help it? Robin asked, and then she shivered all over and squeezed her eyes shut. She dug her free hand in behind her knee, fingers curling into her trousers, and tugged hard, using the pain to ground her. The pain was real. It was an honest feeling, gave immediacy to the vague panic and fear that hung over her like a thunderhead. She was being hunted. She felt as though if she were to look up at the sky right now, she would see the man who seemed so determined to steal it from her bearing down on them from behind a cloud. She could almost feel the coyote's eyes on the back of her neck, and all of her hair under her braids stood up as if anticipating the first stutter of gunfire that was about to rip through her flesh. Something warm and damp puffed against her face, and it took her a second to realize that it was someone's breath. Robin jerked backwards, eyes flung open in panic. Someone was looming over her, blotting out the sunrise. Robin shoved hard at the shadow, panic twisting behind her ribs. It was the coyote. He was here, and Al sprawled back against the gravel of the runway, skidding and throwing up dust, hands out to catch himself. What in all the hells was that for? He snarled from the sprawl. He sat up, staring at his palms, at the places where the gravel had bit into his skin. There was no blood, thank the gods. By the omens, Al, why are you sneaking up on me? Robin snarled back, jerking to her feet. Sneaking up? Robin? Al huffed. You were just sitting there, waiting to be kissed? Waiting to be kissed? Robin repeated, aghast. What makes you think that Al scrambled to his feet, gesturing sharply. You touched my leg, and you leaned in, and you turned your face up. I was trying to comfort you, and I was thinking, I wanted the sun on my face. Omens, Robin, you must know how. Gods, don't even say it, Robin shrilled, taking a scrambling step back even as he stepped forward, arms up, presumably to embrace her. She brushed her shoulders with crossed fingers. Al froze, gawping at her hands. Did you just... as if I'm an ill omen? Robin realized what she'd done, how she'd done it without even thinking, and jammed her hands behind her back. No. You just did. I saw you. Robin, look at me, he said, grabbing her shoulder as she tried to turn away, tried to get away from the mortification, to run. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm sorry. You didn't, Robin lied and pushed herself back again. You pushed me, Al accused, stepping forward to follow her. I was thinking of something else, Robin said. She went to the glider to fetch her capelet, suddenly feeling cold. Clearly, Al sneered. He made a frustrated sound right behind her shoulder. Robin, will you look at me, please? No, she said, focused on doing up her buttons without getting streaks of grease on the capelet's cream trim. Robin, Al said, and from the corner of her eyes, Robin saw him throw up his hands in frustration. I can't honestly be that bad of a choice. You have to marry someone, and there's no one else who'll want you. Robin's blood froze. Excuse me? She snarled, turning to meet his gaze, jaw hard with indignation, chin out. There is no way I just heard that, she thought. There is no way that Al would say something like that. Not to me. Or is there? Al asked, voice soft and suddenly wounded. He crowded her close to the body of the glider, intent on her answer. The Sealies think you're getting jumped up. The Bene think you're out of place. It's just me who knows you, Robin. And you know me too. We could... No! Robin gasped. No! What's so wrong with me that it's not about you? Robin ducked under his arm and whirled around, braid flying to face him again. None of this is about you. I just want to keep you safe. I don't want you to go dance with that maniac. And I don't want to give up the sky! Don't you think I didn't hear you say you were only trying to kiss me because no one else would have me? Ah, I am not a romantic charity case. Of course not. It's not that. It's, please, Robin, Al begged. You've noticed, right? Tell me you've noticed everything I've done for you. How I've readied the forges and hauled the coals. How I've walked you home. Hell's how I painted the damn robin on our glider. Tell me you've noticed. Al, she said, and then hesitated. What could she say? That she hadn't? That she had and had honestly hoped that she was just misinterpreting the signals? That she wanted his comfort and his companionship, but was too scared that if it didn't work out, she'd have messed up the only friendship worth anything to her? I can't think about this right now, she said instead, chickening out. Al's face darkened, hurt flooding his eyes. Don't run away from me, Robin. I'm not running! When have you ever known me to run away? Right now, Al said. You're being a coward. About what? Robin snapped, stubbornly refusing to admit how she felt, because if she did, if she had to say it out loud, then Al would hate her. And she couldn't stand to have Al hate her. I want to kiss you. I noticed I'm not stupid. So then kiss me back. Al, stop it, Robin huffed. She pushed him away so hard that he stumbled and had to grab the wing of the glider to stay upright. A wounded expression flashed across his face, twisting his blocky features into a grimace. I can't do this right now, she said again. I have to think about the Coyote. I have to avenge Wade. Please understand. Al's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Exactly what it sounds like. Do you know what it sounds like? Don't be thick, Al. You know that Wade and I never... God, are you jealous? Al crossed his arms, his lower lip sticking out in an obstinate pout. No. Maybe. You can't be jealous of something that never happened. Then what did? Al said, studying her face. Because something's changed, Robin. You're different. More focused. Angry. I'm not. What aren't you telling me? He pushed. What happened up there with Wade that was so bad you won't even tell me? Nothing! Robin screamed, throwing up her hands. You're lying! Do Tears of frustration burned at the back of Robin's eyes, and she swiped at them with the back of her hand, not wanting to be caught bloody well crying in front of her own glider. He saw me, okay? The Coyote saw me that day too. He looked right at me and he smiled, and I can't shake the feeling that he chose not to kill me, and I don't know why. Al reached out to embrace her, but Robin wasn't going to let him get close enough to try to kiss her a second time. "Don't," she said, and he stopped short, his face shutting down, becoming unreadable. Robin took a few deep breaths and then forced herself to turn and meet his dark eyes. "The love letter. I have to go brief," was all she said. For a tense second, it seemed as though Al would not move out of her way, that she would have to shove him aside to get past. His eyes dropped to her mouth again, and Robin bit her lips, afraid that he was going to try to kiss her. And then the moment passed, and Al took a step to the side, turning his shoulders so that Robin could go by untouched. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she was just angry enough at herself for even wanting to cry that she managed to keep them in check. She forced herself to walk away from him slowly, calmly, back stiff, eyes forward, hiding the fact that she was doing exactly what he'd accused her of. She was running away. When she was halfway back to the base offices, far enough that Al wouldn't be able to see any small gestures she made, she touched the tips of her fingers to her lips. "Rutting hells," she thought bitterly. "That wasn't at all how I hoped my first kiss would go." See you next time.